Day 1010 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzie here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 738,000 military personnel losses, representing an additional 2,030 losses in the past day, becoming a staggeringly, back-breakingly whopping record in this war. That's an entire Russian brigade's worth. As it happens, sprinkled throughout about 1,000 kilometers of front lines, with some very unquestionably very active fronts on this map, even as we stand on November 29, getting so close to the official winter, with these absolutely monumental losses resulting from, take for instance, meat waves in Ukraine's southeast Donbass region right now, combined with the Kharkiv-Luhansk border activities there, but also Kursk, which continues to play a relatively significant role in all of this too. With Putin, through all of it, continuing to show that he is the largest factor for the depopulation of his own people. Then to take a look at some of the hardware losses, so 8 tanks, 33 APVs, 34 artillery, and 1 air defense system, and possibly multiple components given what I'll show you guys shortly. Then as for a bit of a change of pace Friday video, I'll start off with getting stuck into tracking back to the Russian ruble, currently trading at around 106 rubles per US dollar, after falling to a very concerning 113 to 115 rubles per US dollar just days earlier. In fact, just less than 60 minutes ago, it was trading at around the 104 range, but then moved back up to 106. So it's been incredibly volatile. But it also shows that Putin has broke the piggy bank for some emergency stabilization measures intended for their currency, but done so alongside halting foreign currency purchases for the remainder of the year. Because the real shock factor that sent the ruble spiraling in value this week was not just due to the abstract concept of piling up sanctions, although they do indeed play their role, but this decline in value was specifically due to the new US sanctions imposed on November 21, targeting Gazprom Bank and over 50 other Russian financial institutions, disrupting Russia's foreign trade payments, especially affecting energy transactions, thereby creating a shortage of foreign currency in their market. But to say that in a more simplified or down-to-earth manner, this latest round of disruption-causing sanctions reduced the availability of foreign currency in the Russian domestic market, leading to precisely the supply and demand pressures when you can't easily get access to something. In this case, it was a spike in demand for dollars and euros, thereby weakening the ruble. And so with Russia's now flat-out halting of foreign currency purchases, the RCB, so the Russian Central Bank, effectively removes itself from the market, forcibly lowering overall demand for US dollars or euros temporarily, even though most of their industries thrive on the stuff. So this is a drastic measure, but nothing happens in a vacuum, meaning that the problems of this approach include the fact that the RCB cannot build foreign reserves while halting purchases, leaving the country with less financial buffer to stabilize the economy during future crises, as foreign reserves are crucial for managing exchange rate stability in the long run. A lack of reserves then limits the central bank's ability to defend the ruble if further shocks occur. Plus, the halt will also likely signal to international investors and traders alike that Russia is struggling to stabilize its currency and economy, reducing confidence in the ruble and the broader economy. After all, markets are all about perceived value. So we've got ourselves here another short-term approach, stabilizing in the now, but it doesn't address the underlying issues of longer-term sustainability, leaving the economy exposed to much further volatility. In fact, this devaluing of their currency has been a real struggle for years in Russia, because if we go back in time, in the early 90s, it only took about 6 rubles to purchase $1, then fast forward to 2014, costing more than 40 rubles per US dollar, with at that stage going up to 70 rubles, which synchronized pretty well with their annexation of Crimea, mind you. And it's clearly never really been the same since for the ruble. Russia could truly have chosen to learn a lesson from these charts the first time around by understanding something along the lines of undermine the international rules-based order by invading and annexing parts of a sovereign nation, and your currency will halve in value. Hardly seems worth it. Then to take a further look at the end of week figures, we now see that 5,117 Russian officers have been eliminated in Ukraine since the invasion. This week alone, 31 newly registered losses have been noted, corroborated by Russian obituaries and memorial plaques, all compiled through open source methods. But even still, 5,000 plus, a figure that the Kremlin would undoubtedly deny. Then we'll briefly head across to the map today, where Russia's Rostov region has experienced consecutive drone attacks over the past 2 days, as Ukrainian forces have targeted multiple oil facilities, with reports confirming that a drone attack struck the oil refinery in Kamensk, resulting in a large fire that has engulfed much of the facility. Local sources indicate that the strike was anticipated as the refinery had been previously targeted. But this incident appears to be the most damaging yet. In response to these attacks, officials stated that Ukrainian forces have launched widespread operations against the Rostov region, with 30 unmanned aerial vehicles reportedly shot down or disrupted by electronic warfare systems. Looks like the debris got them again. Then, speaking of oil infrastructure, first satellite images show the outcome of a UAV hit at the Kaluga oil depot from back on November 26, with estimates now showing that 30% or more of the oil depot damaged, destroyed, or otherwise quite crispy. 3 tanks destroyed, 6 tanks intact, and 1 tank damaged. Not quite a full hit, but tomorrow is another day. Then to head just a little bit south, as Ukrainian Special Operations Forces are continuing to make significant strides in the Kursk region by targeting Russian logistics. Reports indicate that several supply lines around the front lines have been disrupted, impacting the movement of troops and equipment. It's a focused effort that's part of Ukraine's broader strategy to weaken Russian capabilities. Also, a BMP infantry fighting vehicle and ATV were caught in the mix as well. Then, speaking of Kursk, there was the case of Russian Lieutenant Colonel Sergei Shebnev, known by his call name Otmel, who had posthumously been awarded the title of Hero of Russia for his actions during a former conflict in the Malaya Lochnia Frontline, or former Frontline. And with him being a lieutenant colonel, we can indeed find him on the open source list that I referred to just previously. And there we have it, Shebnev Sergei, followed by middle name Vladimirovich, same as half the people on this list, which is really what might be referred to as a patronymic middle name, which in this case stands for son of Vladimir. So there you have it, just like Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin, with his father of the very same first name. Frankly though, I don't see the resemblance between Putin and his father, which might make some sense given that there's a bit of a speculation regarding Vladimir Putin's family history and who his biological father really was, which is perhaps also why the person you see in this very photo, there's very little known about him except to say that he was a World War II veteran turned factory worker within Soviet Russia. But apart from that, intriguingly, we don't even know this man's date of birth. It's all very suspicious, really. Likely due to the real backstory of drama not falling in line with the Russian state narratives. Now, one such theory gaining traction is that the real Putin family was from Soviet-occupied Georgia, where Putin could have been born. So perhaps it's no wonder then that Putin has his sights set on this very country as well. But I digress. Back to Lieutenant Colonel Sergei Shebnev, awarded the Hero of Russia award posthumously due to sacrificing himself with his battalion by holding off a Ukrainian advance for 14 days in Malaya Lochnia. So he sacrificed his whole battalion, one might argue. Then headed down the map to Crimea. as the defense intelligence of Ukraine reported of the successful destruction of a Russian radar complex named the Podlot, valued at $5 million US, maybe 6 now with the currency exchange. Now, while specific details of the operation remain undisclosed, the intelligence service noted that the enemy equipment was effectively, quote-unquote, burned. And it is interesting timing, because just following that event, perhaps no coincidence, as just a couple of hours ago, an explosion was reported near to Simferopol, where it so far looks like some Russian air defense system just blew up. Based on what you can see here, this typical pattern observed after air defense systems are destroyed. There also seems to be quite some depth to the smoky fallout, suggesting that not just one but multiple targets were hit. I'm quite sure that the AFU envisions a time when the occupied peninsula is stripped of its operational air defenses, leaving only what's available to protect the Kerch Bridge. Then, taking a look around on the map, in Kharkiv, we saw the destruction of a Russian T-72 tank, a Kamaz, Buhanka vans, motorcycles, in this case all done by the formidable Achilles Battalion. Then, also in the east, an AFU FPV drone sneaks up behind and destroys a Russian tank that was operating from a closed artillery position. Noting that the closed artillery position indicates that the tank was not in a typical combat formation, obviously, but was instead stationed at a defensive or concealed location used to provide artillery fire or support. Such positions are often considered relatively secure, making the successful drone strike notable. Then also somewhere in the east, somewhere all around the east and beyond in fact, as the Russian military channels are in disarray following claims of a new order to confiscate civilian vehicles, including those privately purchased by soldiers. The controversy began with a voice message warning that such vehicles would be seized and destroyed on the spot, while the drivers and their commanders would be sent on meat grinder assault missions for not complying with the order. Now, allegedly, this directive applies across the entire front line, and while the credibility of these reports remain uncertain, the backlash on Russian channels is very real. They are voicing frustration, claiming that the order would severely hinder their ability to advance at the front. So perhaps the Kremlin caught onto the fact that sedans, in some cases, sedan vehicles, were used in unsuccessfully storming frontline positions only to meet an ill fate. Sort of a double whammy of bad PR. So this situation warrants further monitoring, but it's an interesting development nonetheless, because the Russian army would starve, figuratively speaking, without access to their civilian cars and civilian Buhanka vans, as used for military reasons, and almost part of official Russian military doctrine at this point. Then, also on the map, from a different angle, we've seen the recent debris as an outcome to the Russian missile attacks on Ukraine, including this Kh-55 missile located in one of the districts of Kyiv. We also saw the same for Russian sea-based Kalibr cruise missiles that were successfully intercepted. Then we'll head across to some news now, as the Netherlands has officially transferred 3 Patriot air defense launchers to Ukraine, as announced by the Dutch Minister of Defense, Ruben Brekelmans. To add some context here, a typical Patriot missile battery includes 6 to 8 launchers based on more standard configurations. So these additional launchers will come in handy. Then in some more news, the Norwegian Parliament has officially approved a substantial aid package for Ukraine of $3.2 billion US for the year of 2025. This actually marks a notable increase from the initially proposed $1.36 billion, reflecting Norway's ongoing commitment to support Ukrainians in their defense against Russian aggression. And as for some further background information on this, for this year of 2024, Norway committed $2.7 billion in aid, and last year provided $2.4 billion, putting on full display that next year's contribution is quite a level up. Then quickly headed to a Russian military mobilization blunder segment, guys. So in a concerning move, not at all unexpected, police and vigilante groups across various regions in Russia are actively detaining young individuals, migrants, and seasonal workers to persuade them to enlist in military contracts. Persuade. This latest initiative appears to be a desperate attempt to bolster recruitment numbers amid significant shortfalls in volunteer soldiers for the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Reports now indicate local authorities seem to be leaning heavily on these methods, reflecting the challenges faced by the Russian military in sustaining its forces. According to Russian VCHK Telegram channel, methods include conducting quarterly illegal raids on various locations to find volunteers for the front lines. Also mentioned was door knock-ins, where teams knock on every apartment to ask about the men living there, aiming to identify potential recruits. Further targeting of specific groups was mentioned, such as the young people, migrants, and individuals who might be under the influence during holiday events like Christmas and New Year's Eve. Plus, these groups are also misrepresenting their intentions by initially presenting their visits as mere educational activities or educational campaigns. The desperate antics of the Russian MOD and the Kremlin. Then headed across to a quick classic funny to round off the video today, guys, as in a recent televised Putin speech, we've seen him back at the podium dancing. Is this the early stage Parkinson's or possible neuropathy down the leg? Or is he tweaking, coming down from something like Hitler did at the 1936 Berlin Olympics? You decide. But the fact remains, he's almost always holding himself down, many times sitting or holding his hands down on a firm object. We also see a sensitive issue for Putin here, with the high heels seen right there, and the likely inner soul lifts too. And it is strange that different Russian sources put Putin's height anywhere between 5'7" to 5'11". But when you measure up those details with the arguably sociopathic Medvedev, always listed at a robust 5'4", we can notice something very strange when these two are photoed together. Putin magically loses up to half a foot based on the varying Russian source material. So I think it's fair to say with Medvedev at 5'4", Putin is 5'3" or 5'2" without the lifts and soles, possibly even slightly less. And I'll just quickly say I have no gripes about a person's height. Good things come in small packages. Good things in poison. But Putin here should wear it proudly instead of the reports of not hiring female staff at the Kremlin any taller than him, or other sourced reports where the Kremlin photo ops involve a selection criteria based on the height, not merit, of those that make it into the photo. I mean, just go on Google Images and you'll find it uncanny how many Kremlin photo shoots of Putin amongst a group of people is such that they're all coincidentally roughly the same height. That is to say, rarely including anyone beyond Putin's height. And so that's why I call him the little guy at the top. Little Putin. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks again for watching. Please continue to like, comment, subscribe, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers!